Hello, welcome to the new P&L, Patterns and Leaders. Every month, business leaders review a profit and loss statement to understand the results of their business. But what if there was another P&L? One that reflected the patterns, leadership, growth, trust, and human decisions behind those results. This is the new P&L. Today, we're exploring a feeling that nearly every CEO, vice president, or anyone has experienced: feeling stuck. Joining me today is Kryssi Murrell, co-owner of K&K Accounting Services. One of the things that I admire about Kryssi is her ability to bring clarity, accountability, and order to complex situations while helping business owners better understand their businesses and financial decisions.
And joining me is Michael Winn, CEO of RBOA. Michael has a unique ability to recognize patterns and opportunities, and he's constantly exploring the connection between personal growth, leadership, and business growth.
You know, Kryssi, one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is that two businesses could have identical financial results but be completely different underneath. So, like, for instance, imagine you had two companies, let's say both generated $100,000 in profit last year. On paper, their profit and loss statements look identical. But what if we looked deeper? So, like, for example, company A could be their CEO is trapped in fear, they have high turnover, they have low trust amongst teammates. They have that sort of hero culture where someone like swoops in and saves the day at the very last minute. Like everyone is like very last minute, right? That almost hero culture, which ultimately, ends up in burnout. And then you have company B, where you've got strong trust, shared accountability, growth mindset, this sort of collective achievement of the entire team, and really a healthy culture.
From the accounting perspective, the financial statements may look almost identical, but the experience of operating those businesses is completely different.
I know, that is what's so crazy. I think, and that's why we call this the new P&L, because the traditional P&L helps us understand what happened. We're interested in understand why it happened, and that's what the new P&L is all about. So I don't know about you, Kryssi, but I hear this all the time that people say they feel stuck. It's one of the most common things. I have faced it as a business owner. I've heard other colleagues, other CEOs talk about this before. But before we talk about getting unstuck, maybe we should talk about or ask ourselves a few questions like, what does stuck mean to you?
To me, stuck can mean different things, right? Like you could be creatively stuck. You can be stuck to where you don't know which way to go. You don't know how to solve a problem, So in business, stuck can mean so many different things.
Yeah, I think it's right. I think you're right. And I think sometimes it's like maybe it's this lack of momentum or lack of movement, um, or like you're having this like growing awareness that like the current situation just really doesn't fit, who we want to be or who we are becoming, right? And so I think that is like the moment of awareness. And I think a lot of people miss this sort of reflection, right? Of sort of, kind of thinking back to this moment where like that feeling of stuckness like came right up against this wall. And I know you and I have talked about this before, and you had an experiment, or I guess more of an experience, really, where you knew something wasn't right. Remind me, like, what was that story again?
This was a long time ago,
Yeah.
but I was at a job and I was saying, it's time for me to move on, move up, been in accounting forever. I mean, over 25 years. And I went for an interview with the job. And the interviewing manager asked, "Do you know QuickBooks?" And I was like, "Oh, how do I answer this, right? Because I want the job, but I knew I didn't know." And I said, "I'm just gonna tell the truth." And I was like, "No, I don't know QuickBooks." And immediately she was like, "Oh, I can't give you the job." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe I did not get this job because I didn't know QuickBooks." So a couple weeks later, I'm still interviewing and I go to another job interview and I met with the owner. And we were just going through questions and that question came up again. And I was like, "Oh, what am I going to say?" And I was just like, "No, I don't know QuickBooks." But the fear had me like stuck, like, "Oh man." And I said, "No, I don't know." And he goes, "Oh, you'll get it." And I got the job. And I was just like, man, I was so scared and, to answer this question. But once I got the job, it made me realize, you know what, I'm going to learn everything about this QuickBooks software so I'm not stuck. No one will ever be able to tell me you're not getting a job because of that.
Kryssi, I love that. I hate that you had to go through that, but what I love about that story is, man, it was like the universe was trying to tell you something.
Right.
Like your desire to learn more, or you were unaware that you needed to learn something in order for you to take that next step, right? And thank goodness you had somebody that said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to give you a chance."
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, and I think that's a really, I bet everyone listening can relate. They got their own story, about something wasn't working, or they kept running into the same, like, it's like they're running around the track and they get to this one part of the track and they got to stop at every single time at the third turn. They got to stop and answer this question, and the answer to the question is no, I don't, or I can't, or and maybe it's like you said, you were scared, or you doubted whether or not you could do it, or whatever that sort of emotional, sort of internal dialogue, that's what was going on, right? But I think that based on what you shared is that oftentimes it's like you need something in your life to like create that pause,
Mm-hmm.
and then for you to pay attention, and then to take action on it, right? Like that's, and so you had to kind of step into this like unknown moment, like I don't know this entire software, like it's a different language,
Right.
you know and so I think, I know for me, like I just feel I have had those situations because I don't have the answers, and that makes me feel uncomfortable. And so some people are just like stick their head in the sand, or do whatever, and let it pass. And then like for you, you're like, no, like, I'm not happy, I'm not satisfied, and I'm ready to kind of take that next step. Um, because I think when I think about it, like there was almost like this hidden opportunity for you, Kryssi, of there was going to be a whole new path for you to get to become the co-owner of an accounting firm. You had no idea
No
that
idea.
that making that decision was going to open the door for literally life-changing outcomes, right?
Right.
And I mean, I think if for people who are listening to this show, and they're hearing your story and they're finding themselves in a similar situation, I hope that they will hear that they may also have to come to a point, just like you did, and say, either I'm going to settle or I am not, and I'm going to do what I need to do. And often it takes learning, right? And admitting or naming it, whatever you want to call it, right? That puts you in that place. So I think people, I've had friends and coworkers and other CEOs tell me kind of similar, like this pattern shows up during periods of like disruption or uncertainty or uncomfortableness. And it reminds me of something that happened. I want to say this was back in March of 2020, right when COVID was like white hot and just, going everywhere. And, we do a bunch of, at RBOA, we do digital marketing for associations and small regional businesses, state businesses in Florida. And many of our clients are associations. So during the summer, the way that they make their money is they have these events, right? Conferences, summits, very normal for associations to do that. And I saw that disruption. I was like, people are going to have to do something else because those members are going to want to get together. They're going to want to learn. They're going to want to connect. Well, even back then in 2020, Zoom, you could get like 100 people on. It was like the max. So I started doing, sort of this legwork of like, are there platforms out there where, people could join with 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000? And, I found some platforms, I interviewed the folks, and I'm learning about this stuff. And we're a marketing firm. I don't know. We don't know anything about virtual event planning or platforms. But I was like, we got to do this. Otherwise, our clients, their P&L statement is going to
Right.
not going to be good.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I recognize the pattern that, every summer this happens. I was curious to what's out there, what are options that are available. I started exploring. I had demos with all the different companies. And then I signed up for some free accounts and literally started like playing, with the settings myself. And I was like, you know what? This is actually not that hard. It's really just a souped up version of Zoom, really. And so I was like, we can offer this, to our clients. And Kryssi, it was like, when I reached out to a couple of clients and I was like, hey, what are you guys thinking about for your sessions or for your summits and conferences? And they're like, we have no idea what we're going to do. And I was like, well, we started playing around with these, virtual event platforms. Maybe that would be of use to you guys. But that's scary. I mean, I remember my team at the time, and I was like, we're going to do this, guys. And I'm sure the team was like thinking the same thing. Michael, we have no idea what, big marker platform is. And so, but they embraced it because, again, that I think that's one of the characteristics of me as well as the team is like we take on that burden of the client, right? And we understand what keeps them up at night. We're not just a marketing agency, we're problem solvers. But it's that opportunity, it kind of shows up, or we don't really realize it until it's on us. And unless you're out there and you see that, because I literally saw the writing on the wall. Like, if we don't offer this, we could potentially lose clients, right? Kryssi, what's the first thing a CEO does when the profits start tanking? What do they cut?
Marketing.
Their marketing budget.
Yes.
Exactly.
Marketing goes out of there. Like, I could do this myself. And it's like, no, you really can't.
Yeah. If we understand that, if you realize you're stuck, you're actually in a good place, because that is actually the beginning. You just have to recognize that it's there and say, I'm stuck. I think that's the thing. I think people just don't want to say that.
I agree. Because once you say it, you have to do something about it.
Yeah, because you have to own it.
Yeah. For sure.
right? And you've got to really acknowledge that, hey, this is where I'm at. I mean, think about this. What I'm sure you run into other CEOs or businesses or friends. Can you see, like, now that you know this, like, do you know friends or whatever associates? And you're like, man, I can see they are stuck. They are so stuck, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it happens to our friends all the time, you
Hmm.
know. And the reality is, I don't think that we can tell them that they're stuck because it has to come from within, right? Which is another reason why I was so excited when we were like, let's put together this episode because we have to start here. Because if we're going to talk about patterns, which is kind of a teaser for episode 2, because we talked about kind of awareness today. Next episode, we're going to talk about what happens after that awareness, and what you described and what I described. I think it was what comes after that is growth, personal growth, business growth. But we have to be honest about it and be willing to recognize, that if we can naturally move through that fear and doubt and uncertainty, that
Hmm.
we can absolutely recognize our own, what I like to call kind of pattern or growth engine, and that we can learn that and we can recognize it and support that growth in others.
I think the biggest thing is the fear and the doubt, you know, because fear will keep you from moving forward and growing, right? So I think once you get past that, or sometimes you just got to say, just got to do it. I just got to do it. Just move past that fear, because once you move past it, it opens up, that growth opens up. You start learning more. And then when you learn, you grow.
Well, I am so glad that we got a chance to get together, and I'm glad for those who are listening that you tuned in today. Remember, the numbers tell us what happened,
The patterns and leaders help us understand why.
and we'll see you next time on the new P&L.